Good afternoon. On behalf of the Board of Invest, I would like to thank everyone who is joining us today from the UK and from Chile. This FinTech panel will be opened by the Minister of Finance of Chile, Mr. Rodrigo Cerda, who will be presenting the new FinTech bill and open banking ruling that has recently been submitted to the Congress in Chile. Then we will be open an interesting discussion on how it facilitates innovation, competition, and financial inclusion, as well as we will be reviewing some international experiences. The panel will be conducted by Francisco Larraín. He is Head of Capital Market at the Ministry of Finance. And now I'm very honored and pleased to turn to you, to the Minister of Finance of Chile, Mr. Rodrigo Cerda.
Hello, I'm Rodrigo Cerda, Minister of Finance of Chile. I'm very glad to be here to be talking in the second day of the Chile Day. And today, well, we're going to be talking about the new law or new project of law we're discussing in Congress that corresponds to FinTech and open finance. This is a very important topic for us, and we're trying to make all the progress in the Congress to have this new law in place in the incoming year. So just to have an idea of what we're doing here. Well, this is just like a part of a very broad agenda we are having in terms of competition and financial inclusion. In fact, we have already made almost 3 laws that are already in place. One of those is the Financial Portability Law, which of course make very easy for financial clients to switch between banks. This is just one way in which people could find better rates and better conditions in their credits. Also, we have another law that we already passed in Congress in April 2021, which is the Market Agent Law, in which we have more transparency in the financial market. And finally, we also approved in May 2021 the interchange fee law, in which we regulate the interchange fee in the card payment system. In addition, we have made some other big steps, we think, in which we are starting to gather more data concerning the FinTech system. So we have made an important survey, and of course we have a few reports from services in Chile concerning the financial system. So in this law, which is part of this agenda, we're trying to make a huge step in terms of FinTech and also in terms of open banking. We have made a lot of work with different agents from the market, from the public sector, but also from the private sector, in which we're trying to make the better and the best bill to be discussed in Congress. And this bill, in fact, has started to be discussed almost 2 months ago in our Congress. Why this is important? Well, this is important because FinTech, or at least FinTech startups in Chile, has been growing very fast. During 2019, the growth rate of the industry is around 38%. Well, this is a huge increase. Also, in addition, we have almost 20% of FinTech companies that are large companies, and in which they are increasing and expanding their business very largely. We think that this is also an important industry today because, in fact, of course, well, we have a reactivation effect. As any country, of course, we are still struggling with the pandemic, and we want that we have a reactivation of our economy. In fact, almost 60% of FinTech companies increased their number of clients during the pandemic. So this is a very important vehicle for financial inclusion. In the long run, we think that this is also very important because we're going to have more competition in the financial system, and in that sense, it's a very important potential for the financial system to continue growing in incoming years. What is the bill doing? Well, the bill in one hand, we have some objective. Of course, we also are going to regulate the fintech services, and we are also going to make huge progress in open finance. So let me talk a little bit about that. First of all, well, the objective of the bill that is currently discussed on the lower chamber of our Congress is to encourage the provision of financial services through technological means. So technology today is quite irrelevant, and we're trying to use technology as fast as possible in the financial sector. What are we regulating? First, we're regulating platform for collective financing of loans or investments. So this is crowdfunding, well, typically, but also we're regulating some other type of industry. We have alternative transaction system that we're regulating, credit and investment advisory services, intermediation or routing services for financial instrument, and financial instrument custody services. All those industries are going to be regulated in this new bill that we expect to be approved in the oncoming month. The first thing that we're doing in this bill is that we're making a registry of financial services. Well, in that sense, every new fintech will be in this registry and will help us to have better information. Why we want better information? Well, because of course we want to prevent any money laundering, and in that sense, fintech companies will be registered and will be also regulated by the money laundering agency in Chile. And in terms of open finance, well, we are also trying to make a huge step. We know that some countries already have some regulation on open finance. Well, what we are trying to do here is that Chile, at least in Latin America, is going to be one of the first countries that is going to have a regulation on open finance. This regulation will be a regulation by law, and in that sense we expect that it will be a regulation that will be quite useful and quite transparent for our financial system. In that sense, the open finance regulatory framework will be a very wide scope in terms of financial institution and the type of data that we're going to be covering on this law. We are going to have also a lot of reciprocity in the sense that those who are providers of information could also be recipients of this information, and which we think is key. Well, we are going to have gratuity for customers in that sense that, well, if we have some financial data, if that financial data is in one fintech company, well, we can share those data, and the customer is not going to pay for that. We are going to have complete gratuity for the customers. Of course, this is not something that is going to happen from one day to another. We have some gradualness in this regulation, and we expect in between 18 to 36 months that the complete regulation will be in place. In addition, we're making some amendment to financial sector laws. We have a lot of laws in our financial sector, and we're trying to improve also those laws in the sense that, of course, if we're using more technology now in the fintech and open banking regulation, of course, the other financial sector laws will also be improved such that technology is going to be used. In that sense, we are eliminating obstacles in order to ensure that fintech company will be able to carry out their activity as effectively as possible. Our regulatory, we are going to have some regulatory symmetry in technology. And finally, we are also looking for having new financing alternative for small enterprises. And of course, we are going to improve our financial customer protection. All the things are needed in the sense that if we're going to have more technology, of course, those laws need to improve such that technology is not going to hurt people, and in that sense, the regulation will have technology in use. As my final comments in terms of fintechs, well, fintechs is, of course, today a key ingredient for promoting economic recovery, but also to improve our financial inclusion and our financial system in the medium term. So in that sense, fintechs are going to be possibly one of our engines of growth in the future in coming years. In that sense, as a Ministry of Finance, we're trying to push as fast as possible this kind of regulation, and we want to have an ambition of a finance system. Probably in the coming years, we're going to be in that sense leaders in Latin America, and we will try that Chile is starting to be a fintech hub that is going to be used for all Latin America. In that sense, even though we have been talking about the fintech regulation and open banking, I also want to say that we're going to make further improvement. One of these further improvement is that, well, we're going to make the presentation of a new bill in which we're going to create a new consolidated debt registry that's also very important for having more transparency in our financial system. We're going to be continuing working in our financial system, and even though we're an administration that we're going to be ending by March 2022, we expect that we're going to make a lot of progress in the incoming months. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon to those in Chile and also to those who join us from the UK. Thanks to Invest Chile and the Ministry of Finance for the opportunity to hear the Minister Cerda presentation about FinTech and the talk we are now having in this panel with this great guest. We have here Kevin Cowan. He's Vice President of the Financial Market Commission, the Financial Supervisor and Regulator in Chile. We also have Rodrigo Krell. Rodrigo is the Executive Secretary of the National Productivity Commission. And finally, we are very grateful that Gavin Littlejohn is joining us today. Gavin is the Executive Chair of the Financial Data and Technology Trade Association and former participant in the UK Open Banking Implementation Entity. Hi, Gavin, it's nice to meet you. I'm going directly to the first question for Kevin and Rodrigo. What is the main virtue you see in the FinTech bill, and what do you think about the collaboration between the public institution in the design of this law?
Well, thanks very much for the question. Let me say, I think, four key issues regarding the FinTech bill. First, this is a bill that substantially expands the regulatory perimeter of the CMF. What we've seen in Chile is a very dynamic FinTech sector. We have over 200 startups, according to our last survey. But a large share of those FinTechs aren't regulated financially. So this generates risks, both for the participants and also reputational risk for the FinTech industry themselves. So I think it's important that the bill is comprehensive and expands our perimeter to be able to regulate and supervise these entities. Second, it is a bill which is structured in a way that is particularly flexible. It expands the perimeter and sets in the law the maximum regulatory requirements that can be required from the FinTech industry, but then allows the CMF through a public consultation process to set out secondary regulation, which could limit or flexibilize some of these constraints. So that second point of flexibility is important. Third, to guide this flexibility, the law clearly sets out a series of principles. And let me just touch on three of those principles which I think are particularly important. The first is proportionality. So the CMF, if the law is approved, is expected to regulate and supervise depending on the size, complexity, and interconnectedness of the FinTech. Second, it is modular in the sense that the law aims and regulation should set regulation and supervision based on the activities and the risks they generate more than the denomination of the entity. I'd say that's a second key component. And probably the third component of the third principle that's important is that it's technological neutrality. So regulation should be based on the activities and the risks, not on the specific technology that is providing the service. So I think that's regarding the flexibility. The third aspect of the law, which I think is important, is that it's not only a law that affects fintech startups, but it's a law that introduces greater proportionality and flexibility to the traditional financial sector in Chile. So not only has the CMF the scope to regulate the new startups with proportionality, neutrality, and flexibility, but also it introduces more flexibility and regulation for traditional players like the stock exchanges, broker-dealers, and so forth. So in that sense, it's being called innovation and fintech law, but I think it's broader than that because it actually encompasses the whole, a large part of the financial sector. So I'd say that is another key component of the fintech law. So with those key components, you also mentioned what you think about public coordination and how relevant this is. Let me just say that I think this is a good example not only of public coordination, but also of public-private coordination. So the CMF has been working on different drafts of this law for approximately 3 years. And in this process, we've had a series of public events and several dozen open tables and round tables to discuss with the industry what are the challenges, what are the risks, what is the adequate regulatory structure. I think that in and of itself is an important lesson. In addition to this, especially in the last stages of the discussion, I think there's been a very important scope for coordination and discussion, obviously with the finance ministry, which is in Chile the ultimate responsible and has significantly enhanced the initial draft of the bill, but also with the central bank, with the productivity commission. So I think it's also a good example of how different agents in the public sector can work together, which is particularly important when you're dealing with a new industry and changes in which your previous track record, your previous experience isn't that informative. You really have to look forward and try to build on best practices.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Rodrigo.
Yeah, I completely agree with Kevin's assessment of the bill. I think it has many virtues. First, well, it updates our regulatory framework, which as today does not do the best job of fostering competition, innovation, and inclusion. We see right now, and until that bill is finally turned into law, Chile is behind some countries like Mexico or Colombia that already have more flexible regulations and proportionality between risks and burdens. In the Productivity Commission, we wrote a report requested by the government, and our research shows something that I think it's very remarkable. We look at, for instance, competition between fintechs and the traditional actors in the financial sector. Because one key thing that we want from fintechs is defiance. We want them to enter, to defy, to compete, and bring more dynamism to the financial sector. But I'm not saying it's bad in and of itself, but most of the interaction between traditional actors and fintechs is that of collaboration. 70% of traditional financial sector institutions collaborate with at least one fintech. And I think that's in part a product of the current regulation, that it's not flexible enough, that doesn't allow, or at least it doesn't foster the entry and growth of new competitors.
Recording
because
in progress.
They are outside the bounds of or the perimeter of the regulator, right? So I think it's key that we move forward with this bill, because well, we need more competition, and that's not a problem only of the financial sector in Chile. We want more competition across the board because that brings productivity that spills over to other sectors. I think one key impact, positive impact that this bill is going to have is that fostering of competition and innovation. With more flexibility, new business models can emerge. They can enter markets and effectively defy the big actors that will also be incentivized to do their own innovation and improve their performance.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Now I have a question for Gavin. Gavin, you have been part of the open banking implementation entity in the UK, and you have studied the experience of open banking or open finance regulation in other countries. So could you tell us which are the mistakes we should avoid and lessons we have to take about other countries' experience?
Yes, so thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, it is quite clear that in the domain of open banking and open finance that we have a number of lessons to learn. The first of these is, as you have clearly identified, to try to make the regulatory principles very flexible and not to be deeply prescriptive in the written word. As you go through the delivery of open banking and open finance, you need to be able to keep making adjustments, and those adjustments to be able to deliver the market-facing objectives. The idea of having neutrality in the domain of technology is correct, but it does also mean that you have to require the market participants to work together on technology. It's not that being technology neutral means that everybody can do as they wish, because actually for open banking to work, it needs to be there needs to be sensible and consistent security precautions. There needs to be the enablement of digital identity. There needs to be clarity on the liability framework. And of course, at its very essence, you need to be able to connect in order to be able to share data and to generate payments. What we discovered, for example, between the UK and the EU, which both delivered PSD2 at the same time, is that in the UK, the regulators led by the Competition Authority went a step further and required the transition from what I would describe as good specification to deeply prescriptive standards. And the qualities of the API and the technical connections were generated much better results than in the broader European Union, where there was no requirement for anybody to adopt any particular technology or to work together. In fact, every data donor could do as they wished. And even now, 3 years after the go-live date of PSD2, there's only about maybe 1/4 of the APIs that are worth using, which is a poor result on what was a very innovative and cleverly thought through original policy.
Thank you, Gavin. Now I have a question for all of you, so please feel free to interrupt. When we talk about fintech, we are talking about innovation and we are talking about the future. So let's talk about changes that we are going to face. What do you think are disruptions from fintech that are going to make life easier for people's daily lives, and not also about those innovations? I would like to know, what do you think about the role of regulators in keeping up to date to the innovations, and is it possible to regulators to keep up to date to everyday new services, new products that completely change the way we think about financial sector?
Yeah, those are both very good questions. Let me take them one by one. The first, I take a slightly different track and say, well, let's think about why, as a financial regulator, we have been dedicating so many resources to fintech in general. And I think that basically relates to the fact that we have a conviction that there is space here for fintech, as you mentioned before, to significantly increase competition. And although that is not in our specific mandate as CMF, it is very closely tied to market development. So the entrant of new participants, challenging existing participants, is something that will lead to a deeper and more diverse financial sector. So I think that is the first. The second, although Chile has advanced significantly in financial market deepening, there are still several pockets in Chilean society in which financial exclusion is relevant. For example, in the payment system, it is clear that we have a very large access to cards, debit cards, credit cards. But for example, when we go to stores, retail stores in particular smaller stores, access to digital payments or electronic payments is still relatively low. So I think this combination of gaps and what we think is the possibility of fintech to close these gaps and promote financial inclusion is the second reason I think it's important to promote a stable growth of the fintech sector, and a reason, to be concrete, which should lead to significantly improving people's life, in particular those that are still at the border of the financial sector. So I think that's the second. Third, it certainly is the case that fintech is delivering new services. It's delivering new services to households and firms that were outside the financial sector. But it's also the case that it's delivering services in a better way. The quality of delivery is important. Let me just, in this, I think there's a very interesting number or data point in a recent survey that the IDB and Cambridge University did as to focusing on firms that were using crowdfunding platforms in Chile and Mexico. And one of the questions was, well, what is the main benefit from this platform? And I think obviously most people were expecting that one of the main benefits was more finance, lower interest rate. But if you look at the numbers, one of the benefits the firms actually emphasized was the fact that the service the crowdfunding platforms provided was much better than traditional financial actors. So in terms of speed of response, flexibility. So I think that sort of encompasses this whole idea that it's not only new services to people that are outside the financial, but also services provided in a better way. So I think these three areas are interact to actually provide what I say is better access to financial services, and that's what I think will be the concrete benefit for households and firms. Now, how to move forward as a regulator with this? Well, first I think the law as it has been submitted to Congress is a good first step in the sense that it allows a lot of flexibility, and this is very much in line with what Gavin was mentioning, for secondary regulation and instructions to be able to adapt to what is that very rapidly changing financial market, especially in the fintech. So I think that is a regulatory approach that, to be honest, wasn't that common in Chile until 10 years ago. In which laws were very prescriptive, but starting with the general banking law and now with this fintech bill, I think we're seeing this idea that the law establishes the framework, guiding principles, and then there's a lot of flexibility for secondary regulation. And I think that also builds on the fact that we now have a financial regulator which has a board, a greater degree of independence, so you can, I think, get the benefits of flexibility without some of the risks which could have been generated when it was a one-person supervisor. So I think that's key. And the second thing which is key is actually within the CMF to have the adequate resources in terms of being able to attract, retain, and train staff which is knowledgeable, who are knowledgeable of these different industries. And obviously this is challenging because it's a dynamic sector. It's challenging because we are in the public sector, and resources aren't always as available as one would hope. But we trust that as we move forward and the bill is discussed, in particular as this is rolled out, we will be able to train and attract these resources, because I think that component is key to be able to efficiently supervise and hence reduce risks without stifling innovation and development.
Thank you, Gavin. Please, Rodrigo.
Yeah, I think the question is very interesting because it's always hard to forecast, right? To anticipate where disruptions will take us, will take markets, right? We're talking about a very dynamic and innovative sector by definition, right? So what impacts could this the development of this sector have, fintech have in people's daily lives? Well, we don't really know right now, but some things we can say or we can reasonably guess, right? Well, better quality of services, new services for both consumers, firms, and most interestingly, well, spillovers, right? That would boost productivity in many other sectors, and that I think is the main benefit. It opens new possibilities. It opens new avenues for development, new markets, new business models. So I think, for instance, right, when we're talking about open finance, right, and that could lead to many new firms entering and competing against banks or other big traditional financial institutions, and that can increase, for instance, well, financial inclusion and better financing for small firms, for startups, and scaling up of businesses.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Gavin, what do you expect are incoming innovations in fintech industry?
Well, I think at a start, when we develop open finance, in addition to the fintechs that have an incentive to be able to utilize these new services, we'll increasingly see the incumbent providers learn how to take advantage and move from thinking about compliance to thinking about opportunity. And of course, at its core, open finance corrects information asymmetries. And everybody wants to know where their customer is when their customer is not with them. That's the foundation principle of open finance. And to be able to make use of that as an incumbent provider or as a fintech, we'll see real innovation in things like affordability in lending, credit decisioning. We'll see the utility of sweeping lower interest cash savings into higher quality investment opportunities. We'll see money management applications. And for the small to medium businesses, we'll see rapid innovation in the accounting platform sector as we move into utilizing not just the data elements, but the payment initiation. We may see faster settlement and a whole variety of things that remove friction from customers' lives and lead to substantially better customer outcomes, either through ease of living or ease of execution, but also material financial benefits of being better off. And I guess responding to your earlier question to colleagues on the panel, the ability of a regulatory authority to continually adapt is a great strength, and this idea of working collaboratively with industry, understanding their needs and adapting, but making it very clear as the regulator that there are expectations of outcome, expectations of good controls and risk, conduct of senior managers, behaviors. All of those things can help drive that consistency of focus on better customer outcomes. And even without deeply prescribing in the law, you can get into a position where the innovations that are coming through are very customer centric. And for me, that's a great objective to be pursuing.
Thank you, Gavin. So you know Chile has a very high developed financial market if you compare it to emerging economies. And there is also an interesting startup culture that has been leveraged by the Startup Chile program and some recent unicorn case of success. So would you say it's possible to Chile being a Latin America fintech hub? What do you think about the benefits of being a fintech hub?
So I think it's very hard to make predictions about how this industry will develop. Moving forward, so whether Chile becomes a hub or not, I think it's desirable, but ultimately somewhat challenging to predict. What is a fact, and I think a very interesting fact, is that internationalization or how quickly the fintech sector has moved across borders is remarkable. So what we've seen in Latin America has been a very slow and gradual process of integrating the traditional financial markets. So it's only in recent years that we've seen the development of regional banks, holding structures, investing in funds and pension management. It's been a very slow and gradual process. Maybe there's some exemptions like with Colombia and Panama, but in general a slow process. In the fintech startup, this process has been almost immediate. So according to the survey that the finance ministry participated with IDB and Finovista, close to 50% of Chilean startups in the fintech sector already are operating in more than one country. And that is really remarkable because they scale up quicker and they're rapidly crossing borders. Obviously, that provides a huge challenge for regulation and supervision because not only is the technology more flexible, but also we have this cross-border nature. And I think something which has received less attention than it should and is relevant here has been the efforts that the finance ministries of the Pacific Alliance countries have been carrying out over the last 4 or 5 years to try to establish at least guiding principles to help regulation and supervision have a certain degree of consistency for the fintech. Obviously, we're very far from what are the principles in banking and insurance, which are much more consolidated industries. But I think at least here there's a concrete effort to try to establish a playing field, which at least is homogeneous in these principles. And if you look at the document which was approved by the Pacific Alliance Ministry, which include Chile, Colombia, Peru, and Mexico, and by the way, cover many of the countries in which Chilean fintechs are operating, there's a lot of similarities between those principles and the bill submitted to Congress. So proportionality, regulate by activities and risk, adequate coordination, including from the start the sector into the anti-money laundering framework. Those principles, and I highly recommend this document, are in the fintech law. So I think that whether Chile is the hub or not will be seen, but at least sets I think a good starting block for a coordination of regulation across the region. I think did that answer all of your question, or?
Yes, absolutely. Maybe if you want to do some final closing remarks.
Yeah.
So
just on closing here, well, I should start by saying what I should have said at the beginning, which is to thank Invest for the opportunity to participate in this panel, and then just add that I think we are very much aware that legislation regulation is one component of this, and then obviously bringing this down to adequate supervision is the rest. And I think we're very aware of that challenge in the CMF. We have been thinking hard about how to change our methodologies, our structures, to make them more flexible, to provide something like a hub which would allow initial interactions with fintechs, and obviously we will be moving forward in parallel with that discussion as the law goes through Congress, because we think that in that sense we have a lot to learn from other countries, and obviously some catching up to do. And I think here the objective is very much as I think Gavin mentioned. We want to facilitate the development of this industry, but we want to do it in a way which is sustainable, and sustainable means that this industry has to develop adequate risk management frameworks, has to be consumer-centric and protect the consumer, and I think the law is very explicit in that, because that is what will generate a sustainable industry moving forward. In fact, several of the startups we have been discussing with have recognized that having a good regulation actually will promote long-term growth. Because they're very much aware of the reputational risk that can be generated if some fintech actor abuses customers' trust and has a severe issue. Trust is obviously key in this sector, and it has been building over time, but can be lost. So I think the sector itself is aware of this risk. And the second is that regulatory clarity also allows them to scale up. And in this sense, I think Brazil is an interesting case, because we actually saw that fintech investment actually went up once there was a legal framework. So I think moving forward, a lot for us to do at the CMF, and this conviction that I think a good regulatory framework will actually support the development of this in a way which also will adequately rein in the risks for different users.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Rodrigo, Gavin, please.
Yeah, I once again, I agree with Kevin. He raises a very important point. I think Chile can and could become a hub for fintech and innovation. But we have to do some things first, right? First, we have to update and upgrade our regulatory framework, which this bill points us towards, right? And that it will be hopefully enriched in the Congress when it's discussed. We don't know if we'll get there, but we could, and I think the past experiences of Chile in other areas, well, it gives us reasons to be somewhat optimistic. Chile, well, developed very rapidly, we know, in the last 30 years. We've shown some amazing results in many industries, so I don't think there's a reason to be pessimistic about the prospects of the development of the financial sector. Especially if we upgrade our regulations, which is as of today, I think somewhat of a barrier towards that goal. Regional integration is key. I think nowadays it's a virtue, and it's a very fortunate thing that firms can internationalize very quickly between neighboring countries and the Pacific Alliance. I think international agreements are key towards that goal. So I'm overall hopeful about this, the future of the fintech industry in Chile.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Gavin, have you heard about Latin America's development of fintech? I think it's a region with very, very interesting case of success. I don't know if you have heard about them or maybe about Chilean case of success in fintech industry.
Yes, thank you. I guess a couple of things. As a trade association, we operate in South America, Latin America, and are reasonably familiar with the rapid growth of the fintech space. Just building on the ideas of my fellow panelists, investors like to have some regulatory certainty. You like to know that when they put in substantial capital into new innovation, that those investee companies cannot be inhibited from progressing in the market. And as an entrepreneur, I was personally in the open banking space in the UK prior to the regulations of PSD2 and the UK's Open Finance Order coming in, which went live in 2018. In fact, I participated in this market as far back as 2005. And the wall of capital that has followed the regulation of this industry is astonishing. And we've seen the same recently in Brazil, we've seen the same in Australia. In India, they released the account aggregators ecosystem a few weeks ago. And again, that's of great interest to investors. Because the last thing you want is to deploy your money and then find that the companies you've invested in are operating in a playing field that is not level, where they don't have the right to trade, where the customer's rights to use the ecosystem are not protected, and where the liability framework is not clear. All of those things add additional risk. And where the regulatory authorities and policymakers, as is happening in Chile, start to tidy up those issues, then you make a case for really substantial investment flowing into these markets to the betterment of job creation, of innovation, of competition, but most of all to the benefit of the small businesses and consumers in Chile that make use of these services. And one other thing that may just be of some interest to your audience. A few months ago, the new Global Open Finance Centre of Excellence created a technical standards working group. And that now has the technical standards agencies for open finance from the EU, UK, Brazil, Russia, China, Japan, India, Australia, US, and a whole variety of other markets in Africa and the Middle East, all working on the security elements of how data and money move around the world economy, but particularly focusing on interoperability with a long-term plan to converge towards consistent standards. And it would be great and very welcome if the Chilean fintech and banking sector took advantage of the opportunity to participate in that. Obviously, there's a lot to learn from technical implementations that predate the ones that are coming in Chile, but also there's the opportunity for Chilean businesses to use the same technical rails to begin to expand into other markets and for other companies to invest in Chile. And both of those things I expect to be welcomed by the Chilean finance ministry and regulatory authorities.
Gavin, do you have any closing remark?
Yeah, I was very gratified to be given the opportunity to participate in this conversation. I thank the authorities and Invest for making those connections. And I'm hoping to myself, representing the trade association I chair, to come to Chile in the new year and to meet the key participants and to share all of the information that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. We're looking forward to meet you. Rodrigo, do you have any closing remark?
Yeah, I also, of course, I want to thank Invest and for the invitation to participate in this panel. I think it's key that we keep talking about the development of fintech and introducing competition, innovation to, in the end, better the lives of Chilean citizens, right? That's what's all about in the end.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Gavin. It's always a good time to learn. And also we want to thank the Invest Chile and the Ministry of Finance for the chance of hearing about this fintech bill, fintech and open finance bill, and also for talking about the development of this sector that's going to bring a lot of benefit to the financial sector in Chile. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.